Hey there friends, Tim from Chamferzone here. Welcome to the holographic site tutorial, a complete start to finish chapter directly taken out of my latest flagship course, the Ultimate Weapon Tutorial 2 Masterclass. This is the most comprehensive tutorial course that I've ever created, and it pretty much combines everything that I have learned in the last 20 years of working in the industry as a senior 3D artist. Well, I started as a junior artist as well, but this is basically the sum of my entire career put together in a massive course where we are creating an AR-15 together with multiple attachments, 2 different scopes, as this one included here, the holographic side, and 10 different texture skins. So there's a lot of modeling, a lot of texturing. There's going to be renders at the very end in Marmoset Toolbag. And with that, it's really the complete package that I am very proud to share with the world. And if you haven't yet, please check out my cinematic release trailer for it. I put a lot of time in that one as well, and I hope you enjoy it. And with that, enough talk about the main course. This here is the 7-hour start to finish holographic side chapter in which we will then already create that holographic side. And we are going to start out in Blender, where we do in this episode our basic scene setup. We will also talk about the plugins that we're using, and we're really going to make sure that we're on the same page before we get started. So you will have time to make sure your Blender has the same tools that I have. It's all free tools. I'm not gonna make use of any paid plugins. So with that, we will then have the base established in this episode, and we will get started to work on our basic model. And later, we will then have another review of what we were doing in this episode, starting then with the next episode. So this format here that you see, this virtual studio, is another thing that is a new addition, starting now with the Ultimate Weapon Tutorial 2 course, where we will always have this type of a briefing to chat about some of the things that were maybe a little bit on the complex side, and we can also then point out or emphasize certain things that were maybe not mentioned during the action, because I have to be fast with the voice narration, like now we do this, now we do that. So this here serves to have a bit of a review. So enough talk. Let's get started. I'm very excited to see also what you're doing. Feel free to join the Chamferzone Discord and share your work or ask questions if you're ever stuck. Let's get started, and I'll see you soon. Hey there, friends. Let's get this started. And let me show you that I am on Blender version 4.5. That was the latest version at the time of the recording. But either way, you know how things are with Blender. It doesn't change dramatically overnight. So I was just closing the animation tab here. And let's continue by having a quick look here at some of these plugins that I highly recommend to use while we are then working on our holographic side. One of them is Modifier List. That is a must-have plugin in my opinion. Let me just show you what that looks like if we then add our modifiers here to the stack. It provides us with more visibility. Once we then add multiple modifiers, we can reorder them, we can hide them, we can delete them. In short, it's a very good plugin, and that one I would certainly recommend you to get. The next one is Maxiv Interactive Tools. there is this comprehensive thread here on poly count where you see all the different actions explained in detail together with some GIF animation. There's two actions in particular, which is Quick Origin and Super Smart Create, that I make use of all the time, and I will make sure to mention it whenever I make use of it. You can get this plugin here either for free on the Gumroad page, or you can decide to make a donation to the creator. The same goes then here for that circular array plugin, which is another essential one. You can get that here for free on the GitHub page, or you can make a donation there on that website that I just showed you. You will find all the links in the essential folder where I have a README to all these plugins. So the next one would then be this Mio free plugin, as well as text tools. And these are essential for doing some of the unwrapping actions that we're doing. And once again, it's a free plugin. You will then find it here on the official website, where you can then just download it and simply install it through the Blender plugin interface. There's one more plugin that I will then be using once we get to the packing of our UV maps, and that one is called Umbrella. Previously it was called UV Packer. Now it's called Umbrella, and it's a really great, if not outstanding plugin that does a fantastic packing job, and I consider it another must-have. So that sums it up so far for the plugins. Next, let's start by going over to units, and let's put that here to millimeters. I like to work in metrics. Let's press the key right under Escape, our tilde key, and let's go to right orthographic view, as well as pressing numpad 5 to get to the orthographic view. So within that view, let us then press Shift and A, and let's spawn a cube into the scene. And let's put that to 96.5 millimeters. That is then followed up by adding a reference image to our scene. You will find it in the Essential folder. And with that reference, let's select it and let's scale that all the way down so that it fits here onto the left and right side of our bounding box that we just added here to the scene. Let's then select that box, and let's also add the proper numbers here for X and our Z dimensions. So with that, we have the exact dimensions of our holographic site. Let's then position that once more here in the right orthographic view. And I really recommend you to just copy and paste 0.083 into X, Y, and Z on the reference image, so that we are on the same page, or more like the same dimensions throughout the rest of the tutorial. In our reference image tab, I'm putting the side button here to front so that this is not in the way depending on how we look at it. Let's make a so-called snapback copy. We press Shift and D while moving the mouse, right click to let it snap back in place. Let's then rotate that copy. Pressing Ctrl lets us rotate in 5-degree steps, and now in the front orthographic view, let's position it so that it fits here once again into our bounding box. Let's drag this out, and once again we're making a snapback copy, which we can now rotate, go then into the back orthographic view, and let's also position that here according to our bounding box. Let's then also drag this out so that we have some space to work with. We're making another snapback copy, rotate that 90 degree. Let's now go over to the left orthographic view. And we have the same procedure here. We are moving it on the y-axis till it fits there into the bounding box. Let's then make some space again. And with that, we have it for our left, front, back, and right view. Let's go back to the right view and let us then make another copy. Once again, a snapback copy. Let's rotate that and let's go to the top view. And that way we also then have a reference here what it looks like from the top. So if you press Shift while using our transformation gizmo, you can be a bit more precise here. And with that, let's drag that further down on the Z-axis, and then we only have one more left to do. Let's go back to the right orthographic view. Let's make a snapback copy and let's rotate that. And we want to go now to the bottom orthographic view, where we can then also position that so that it fits within the left and the right bounding box proportions. It doesn't have to fit within the rest of it because there's always a perspective on these pictures. So let's just position it a bit further there to the back. It's okay if at the front there is some space. And with that, we have a very nice setup. Let's select our box and let's drag that out into the scene collection, where we can now create a new folder called Holosight, and let's put that box in there, as well as renaming the other folder to references. Let's go to that filter icon and let's put that arrow icon on. And with that, we now have also these arrow icons here. Let's press the upper arrow. And with that, we now have this locked into place for our reference images so that this is not disturbing us. So let's actually go into our front orthographic view. And let's then click that folder icon for Holosight and let's add a cube to the scene with 21.2 millimeter size, same as our Picatinny rail reference here. Let's position that according to the reference and let's subdivide it. And based on that selection, let's then make another subdivision here, followed by yet another vertically. Let's bevel the one here in the center. And with that, we then can make some connections here. And since we have X-ray mode on, it's also then affecting the other side. So now we can take these vertex points that we don't need, convert it to faces, and let's delete it. And now let's fill these selections here and let's reconnect these vertex points. So the idea is to just have a block out here for our Picatinny rail dimension, which we can now take down here, where that would then also be mounted on. So that one we can put into a subfolder. Let's just call it Picatinny. Let's drag that in there. And once again, I'm going to lock it so that we don't accidentally select that. And with that, I'm going to unlock it once more because I also wanted to extend it out here on our side profile. Now I'm locking it again. And with that, we can now take our original box that we have created. So we're starting now to make a block out for this exterior shape that we have here. Let's add a subdivision. Let's position that down here. Based on that, let's have another subdivision. And there's going to be a few of these. Let's position that then a bit further here to the right. Based on that, let's add a subdivision here into the center. But I'm going to leave it as it is. Instead, let's add another subdivision here. And let's then take this vertex point and let's start to position that here. And we want to keep it as low poly as possible in the beginning. We are then gradually going to add more and more to it. But the main idea is to really hit that shape. We want that silhouette to be blocked out before we then start to refine that. And that is best done here by adding one subdivision after the other. Now you can see we already have a bit more refined here for that curve shape. And with that, we can then also take a look at the other sides in just a moment. But let's just add the minimal amount here on the side profile that we need. And I just wanted to make a mention about our reference images. Since these are picture-based, we have to take into account that there will always be a perspective on it. So it's not like we have perfectly orthographic blueprints here in the scene. These are not always available to us, and because of that, we will just have to be a bit flexible about that. And we will then take it slowly here as we are blocking out the silhouette and also as we are then looking at it from other sides in a moment. So I was just dragging that Picatinny folder on top of everything to have the Holosight folder here at the bottom. Let's then go into this view. Let's add a subdivision into the center and let's delete the left side. And now let's add a mirror modifier. We're keeping it symmetrical for as long as we can. Let's now right click with this selection and let's go to Interactive Tools plugin and let's put the quick lattice on that. We take these two upper control points, select our move tool and let's position it here like this. To make sure the left side is also doing what we want, we have to put the lattice on top of the mirror, which is easy to do with our modifier list plugin. Let's then confirm the lattice, and now we're still left with this helper object, which we can safely delete. Let's go to viewport overlay and let's enable our statistics so that we see our vertex count and also how many objects we have in the scene. Let's go over then to the add-ons and let's enable the pre-installed loop tools. This one already comes with Blender, we just have to activate it. So now let's continue to refine our silhouette here from this side. Let's take that center vertex a bit further up here and let's add a subdivision here to these two edges. And let's then drag that a bit further out. Here's one of these cases where we need to bevel. So we are just combining things here with bevel and also by adding manually the subdivisions. And I'm going to put 3 segments on it here. I'm going to put the width to 5.8 here. And now we can continue with another subdivision, which we then just manually drag out here. Let's also add a subdivision here. Let's put the count up to 2 so that we have a bit more leverage here with our silhouette. And speaking of which, this is starting to look good there at the top. Let me now simply delete everything that we had in the center. And let's add our solidify modifier. Let's find the right numbers for it here. And 5 millimeters might be a bit too much. Let's put it to 4.7. And now we can continue to work on that here in our X-ray view and refine a bit more here that silhouette. And with that, we can then make a copy of our case that we worked on so far. Once again, I'm making a snapback copy with Shift and D and right mouse button to snap it back. Let's go over to our right orthographic view and let's simply delete everything here at the top. That leaves us then here with this as a base. Let's then select it and let's simply drag that a bit further here to the left. And you see how we still have the same modifiers on since it's based on the copy. Now we can start to refine that a bit more here. Let's start by adding a subdivision. And instead of just pushing that vertex a bit further up, I'm going to make a bevel here on that edge. Now I have the upper edge where I want it, and that means we can dissolve the lower one. So that way we ensure that this is still perfectly planar and we maintain that planar shape. We can now take the upper edge and start to continue working on that silhouette. I'm going to extrude now with this edge. And let's position it over there. Let's do another extrude followed by yet another. And now we can start to refine our curve here. Let me undo the last action because I want to go to the solidify, put the even thickness on. And let's then also select the outer case where we also want to do that. Let's also put the setting to complex, and we want to do that then again also for the other one here. So somehow the recording didn't show the next 3 seconds, but you'll see now what I'm doing. So we have the complex mode on and we were just positioning that vertex so that we can continue then on our silhouette here. Let's toggle the solidify off. Just as a quick demonstration, usually I right click and subdivide so far. Here you see me doing the same just by a one-click operation, which comes through Super Smart Create, which you can also map to a mouse button if you want. I can highly recommend that. And with that, you can simply then add subdivisions here through the Super Smart Create action. So that way I can now add subdivisions with a one mouse click operation instead of always right clicking and tell it to subdivide. Let's now continue to work on the inner shape here. And you can see that it is hidden a bit in there so that the outer one is really the protection case. And because of that, we can now take these vertex points and drag them in there, followed by making a subdivision through Super Smart Create here in my case. Let's also add one down here so that we have a few more edges to work with here. We're keeping it low poly so that we can really work on that curvature silhouette first before we then commit to having too many bevels in there. That will follow once we have that looking here in the right way. So it might be a bit too much in there now. I'm going to take these points and drag it a bit further here to the left. And on the right, I'm going to press S, Y, and 0 to align it on the Y-axis. Let's drag this in here like that. And let's then right-click and let's make use of Quick Lattice again. And I'm going to align it so that it looks about the same as we have it there on the outer case. And with that, we can then collapse the lattice. Let's toggle solidify off for a moment. And I'm going to take these vertex points here together with the other one there on top. Let's drag this out and let's also align on the Y-axis. Let's then take these two edges here. You will sometimes see me jumping in and out of the isolation mode just so that I better see what's going on. And with that, we can add yet another edge loop. It's not a loop yet, but it will be once we add solidify back on. And then we can refine further here our shapes. Let's take a look at the outer one once more. And I'm now going to take all these edges. Remember, we still have the solidify on. And based on that bevel, which I'm going to put to 1.4 in case you just want to copy it. In fact, 1.55, which looks more of an even number there. We now have committed. This is how we want that to be. Our silhouette was looking good. And because of that, we can then just go ahead and increase our edge count. And speaking of edge count, I was just adding a few more subdivisions here. Let's remember we want there to be some curvature. So that inner piece is still work in progress as far as the silhouette goes. Let's make sure it's looking good here in the front orthographic view. Let's put the solidify back on, but let's also take a look at it here from the back orthographic view. And based on that, I am now going to select these vertex points here, and let's drag it a bit further here out to the left. So that's why we're keeping things low poly. It makes it then easier for us to make sure that these silhouettes look good from each one of the sides. And I was just adding a subdivision here to get a bit more of a curvature in there now. And speaking of which, I am now going to bevel this upper edge here to continue working there on that curve shape. Let's take these points, and once again, I'm dragging it a bit further out to the left. And let me also lower the thickness amount here on our solidify modifier. And I'm going to put it to 3.7 here for this inner case thickness. The outer one can be a bit more thick there. And now I'm seeing in isolation mode that this is not perfectly aligned anymore. Because of that, I am going to take these points here. And now I'm making use of loop tools, flatten command. And you see that perfectly flattens it. And we can then just push it a bit further out so that we also have it nicely aligned there for the lower faces. Let's take then this edge here, and I'm going to also give that a bevel. These edges where the curve is either ending or starting, depending from how you look at it, these are always critical for then the main look of it. And we want to ensure it's as smooth as possible there around these. Speaking of which, I was just adding yet another subdivision, and I'm going to add another one here. So in this case here, I prefer to keep it under manual control instead of just giving everything a bevel. But then on selected edges, like this one, I'm going to give it a bevel. And that results then in a smooth curve here for the inner one. Let's go back to the outer one, and I find that still not smooth enough. I'm going to also add a subdivision here. And now, same as here, let's make sure there is a nice and smooth transition. So also we want to make sure that the spacing in between these vertex points is looking consistent and that we don't have these gaps in between there. So we have to just reorder it a bit, make some new subdivisions, And that way we then get the results we want. And based on that view, I'm thinking I need yet another subdivision here now. So let's take it into isolation mode here with the other one. And let's compare the silhouettes. Let's also see it here from the right side. And that is where we still have to do some more work now. Let's start by taking these two edges and let's give it a bevel. And here at the upper parts, we can make it a bit more smooth since that wasn't a hard edge there. Let's take this vertex point and let's drag that further out here to the right. And based on that, we are going to take these two edges, make a subdivision, and that way we have this more nice and curved there. That is what we need. Let's position that a bit further right here on that vertex. And now I'm going to make use of the knife tool. And I want to cut all the way here on the z-axis through the center of this cylinder that we're seeing there. Let's align that on the z-axis, and now we're deleting the right side. Let's go to the cylinder tool here. Let's put the orientation to default and let's increase the vertices up to 40. And here we change it over to the x-axis. So now with left mouse button, keep it pressed as we define the size. And once you let go of it, you can drag it further out there into the back. So here you can see my dimensions. X and Y are the ones that matter because the Z dimension we will define in a moment. Let's put the quick origin here into the center of this edge and let's then enable our vertex snapping. And with that, we can now snap it here directly onto that corner. Based on that, we can then put the location to x0. Let's select everything and let's then scale this out here. So I'm toggling the vertex snap off again so that we can then continue to extend that out there a bit. Let's hide that cylinder for now. We will get back to it. I'm going to delete that helper object here from the quick lattice. Let's put the solidify modifier back on. I'm going to unfreeze our reference folder again by clicking on that arrow here. Now I can select the reference and I just want to push it on a very small level, a bit further to the right on the x-axis. Now I can freeze that again, just a very small fix. And now let's go back here to the inner case. I'm going to make use of Super Smart Create here. First, let's add a vertex point, and while holding Shift, we can now select this one and again use Super Smart Create to connect it over there. So let's now select this vertex point here, and we want to enable vertex snap. Snap it against the other one there. Now we can select both of them and push that a bit further up here. So because of that, our curvature changed. We just have to realign that here in the right orthographic view. And now it's time to collapse the solidify modifier. And we continue to take these faces and extrude them out into the center. So with that, I am now going to enable vertex snap and align these vertex points here where I want to keep that straight, where this is all connecting. Because of that, we have to go back here to our right orthographic view and adjust this vertex there so that it's one smooth transition again. And speaking of transition, now it's time to work on this curvature here. So let's just take these vertex points individually and let's drag them over so that we are getting this shape there in place. Let's continue here with this one, same as then this one. Let's take this into isolation. And let me undo what I just did. I want to get out of vertex snap and position that a bit further to the left here on that vertex. So I'm liking the silhouette. Let's toggle the mirror modifier off, and we got these faces here that we can just select in X-ray mode and delete them. I'm selecting the full ring here by pressing Alt and Control. Add a subdivision, which I will now align on the y-axis, sy plus 0. Let's position that and let's give that a bevel. And I'm going to put that bevel amount to 1 millimeter. Next, I also want to realign this here. Let's take these vertex points that I have here and let's also do a sy and 0 on that. Now we can add a quick lattice to it. And based on that, we can make that look better as we had that there before. I want this to be perfectly flat, and that way we have that now. I'm just aligning it here also with the outer case. And while we're at it, I'm going to push it a bit further here to the front. Let's confirm the lattice. Let's delete the helper object. And let's do another ring selection that we also subdivide. Let's again align that. And also with 1 millimeter, let's add these edges into place. So let's put the quick lattice on these ones here as well. Let's take the lower control points and let's bring that here to the front. Now we can take the other ones and let's align it here like this. With that, let's collapse that. Let's delete again the helper. I want to collapse the mirror modifier as well. Let's turn bisect on before we do that. And that way we don't have these faces there in the center. And speaking of faces, let's do an inset. I for inset followed by pressing Control. And I'm going to put some precise numbers in here. 0.5 and -1 millimeter. So with that, we already have the frame there for our window. And that will be then followed up by selecting these faces here. And you can see how it's going to the inside there at the bottom. I'm going to make another inset. Let's deselect the upper faces here, which leaves us then with that. Let's extrude that down. And I'm going to leave it like that, but just bring it up a notch again. So now we can focus on the windows. Let's take these faces here and let's make a snapback copy again. Shift and D and right mouse button to snap it back. Let's go to edge mode. Let's fill that. And with that selection, we can invert it. Control and I, and simply delete these faces that we don't need there. So that way we are left with a plane, and we can then do the same thing here. Another snapback copy. Let's fill that, invert the selection, let's delete that, and now we have our windows here. Just a quick check then here in the X-ray view if everything looks okay. Same here at the front. And since that is the case, let's then rename that. Or more like, let's give it a proper name. This one I'm going to call Holosight glass rear _low. Let's copy that name and let's paste that onto the other one, but here it's our front underscore low. Let's hide these classes. We now have them, and since they are a bit distracting, we just toggle them off for now and bring them back if we need them. So let's go back here to this cylinder, and I noticed that I didn't have that perfectly snapped. So I'm putting vertex snap back on. Make sure this is aligned. Let's continue by adding a subdivision here into the center, and that one we can then also snap here. Let's go to object mode, and next I'm going to make a Boolean operation, and I'm using Bool Tools. It's a free plugin and a one-click installation. That's the one that I'm using. And with that, I'm selecting the other piece while pressing Shift. Go to the Boolean tool here and put it to union and exact. So with these settings, let's go to apply all cutters, which confirms this. And now we can delete the right side in the X-ray view. Let's put the mirror modifier back on and let us then unhide our glass front and rear. Let's come back here to our silhouette of the inner part. And this looks a bit too low poly there so far. I'm adding another edge loop here. And that way we got a nicer curve there. At the upper part, I'm taking this edge loop and I'm giving it a bevel. So the next work will be here at the front where we have that cylinder. Because of that, I want to make some space here. And by making space, I'm talking about deleting some of these faces. For the following work, it's better to just get everything out of the way, which would otherwise distract us. And that is also the case here for these edges, same as these upper two ones here. So next, with Super Smart Create, I'm going to add a vertex point right there into the center of this edge. And that I will then snap and connect like this here. Let's go quickly into our options here. First one is I want to put backface culling on. Second, I want to enable auto merge with 0.01 merge threshold. Let's dissolve this edge here. I don't want to have that too busy there with all these edges. And speaking of edges, let's extrude them out. Let's align that here on the x-axis and let's put it to 0 on x. So now we have that connected there at the bottom. Let's take a look at our top view. Earlier when we made the Boolean operation, it created some stray vertex here in my case, which I am now going to delete. And also I'm going to merge everything that we have on a low merge distance threshold. Let's go over to the top view. And while being in X-ray mode, let's use our knife tool on the Y-axis. And let's put that all the way down to where we have this detail on the reference here. And following that, we're going to push these vertex points here to follow along there with this curve that we have there. Let's select the lower edge, and with Super Smart Create, we can add a vertex point and drag that further to the left, as well as connecting it then. So that looks good. Let's select these edges here and let's give it a very small bevel. So now we have two edge loops. Let's select the outer one and let's vertex snap that against these points here. And also let's vertex snap this one. So now we have a few more edges to work with. Let's take this edge and with Super Smart Create, let's add a vertex point to it. Let's then vertex snap that against this vertex point here. Let's add another vertex point into the center of that, and let's also vertex snap that against this one. So now we have a good alignment, and we can then delete these faces here, take these edges and extrude them out. Let's align them on the y-axis, S, Y, and 0, and let's vertex snap them over here, as well as then filling it like this here. Let's continue to connect, same as these two. Now on this big gap, let's press Alt to select the full loop, and let's also fill it. Let's compare with our reference. We have that nice and smooth there at the inside, and that means we can dissolve these edges here, same as this one. Let's dissolve this edge there as well. And let's then use our knife tool to add some support edges here on the x-axis. With that, it's now time to collapse the mirror modifier, but first make sure you don't have any faces there in the center. So let's collapse that. And from now on, we're going to treat that as if it was not symmetrical anymore. Let's start by positioning this here according to our reference there in the top view. And let's then use the knife tool here on the z-axis to make a perfect cut down. Let's then take these faces and let's delete them. We're making a connection like this one here and also get rid of that face. And now we can take these free edges, extrude out, snap it back, and let's just vertex snap it then. This one is already merged together. The upper ones need to be target welded here like that. Let's fill that up, and let's take a look at the reference, what that inside part actually looks like here, and you can see it's perfectly planar for the most parts. Let's dissolve this edge. Let's connect this one here in the center. Now we're switching over to the knife tool and press the Z key to align it on our Z-axis. And that way we are creating a few extra vertex points there at the top, which we will then need in just a moment. And you can see now in the top view that we have a few vertex points to work with to get that shape here into place. And I'm toggling off the vertex snap to make that a bit easier here. Otherwise, it sometimes likes to wildly snap around. And with that, we have a nice curvature here. Let me subdivide these here. And I'm putting the division up to 3. And that way we have once again a few more extra edges here, which we can then manually control to get this nice curve there into place. Let's dissolve this edge that we don't need. So before we continue, I want to go to Object Mode, press Ctrl A and apply rotation and scale, because we did quite a bit of work already on that. And it's good to reset that from time to time to rule out any issues on the transformation. So based on the reference, I'm doing an inset. You can see my number there. I'm extruding that out here, also based on our reference, and I'm adding a subdivision here into the center. Let's position that a bit further back there. You see that we have this cavity there, and I'm going to add that here by selecting these faces as a ring selection, and pressing Ctrl, we can now put the depth to -1.2. Let's make a ring selection on that one, followed by a subdivision. Let's take then these faces here and let's extrude them to the inside. Now we can make a small bevel on that edge loop. Select the lower faces and drag them back to the left. Not extrude, but just drag. So that way we have a nice detail there now. Let's take these faces and let's do an inset on it. In the inset settings, let's put individual on. And with the thickness being okay, I'm just going to put the depth to 0.26 to make it come out like that. Let's take that face and I'm going to do an inset while pressing Ctrl to get a bit of this bevel shape. And the next detail can then be this here, where we want to connect it here like this on these two edges. So make sure it goes right there through the center so that we can now take these faces, go to our top view, let's put extrude manifold on, and with that we can push it in like this here, as well as aligning it on the x-axis. Let's delete these faces, let's fill them back up. Let us dissolve these two edges and also here at the bottom. So that way we got this nice and clean. Let's then take these two edges and let me show you here that these need a bevel. So with these settings here, I'm putting it to 0.6 and I'm going to follow that up with another smaller bevel here to make that really smooth there. So that pretty much takes care of this detail here. However, I need to push that a bit further back again. That was coming out too much there earlier. Let's then continue and we want to work then on this small detail here as the next thing. Let's use the cylinder tool. And let's start with 18 vertices. Let's drag it out like this here. And I know this looks strange, but don't worry, it will make sense in just a moment. Let's rotate that around here and also like this. And now we can add a subdivision here into the center. So let's drag that in there like this. Let's then take that center edge loop and let's make a snapback copy with Alt and left mouse button to snap it back. Let's separate that out and now we can delete the cylinder. So that leaves us then with just the edge loop here. But before we continue, let's come down here. So now I'm noticing that I had an extra edge loop there, which I am dissolving. Let's make a snapback copy for these faces. Let's separate them. Let's isolate it. And now with Shift, let's select these two edges here. And now if you press Shift, Control and the plus key, you can select every second edge like this, which we are going to dissolve. And we put the quick origin into the center. Let's put a subdivision here into the center, which we also make a snapback copy of. We can now delete the cylinder and that leaves us here with this. Let's scale it just a slight amount up here so that it's not intersecting. And now we have these two edge loops that we join together with Ctrl and J. Now we can come over here to the X-ray view and start to push these vertex points out. Let's delete the edge there in the center. And now in vertex mode, while extruding, let's just keep it low poly and let's make a few extrusions that follow along this shape here. So here we then have the other shape. Let's delete that edge and let's merge this together here. So that's a good start. And with that, I'm going to also extrude it out here for one segment. Let's come over then to a different orthographic view, which is the back view. And based on that, I'm selecting these points here. And let's rotate them over a bit like this here. So let's take these upper vertex points and let's follow along this curvature that we see there. And followed by that, we can now give these vertex points a one segment bevel here. So that way we got that nice and smooth. I'm going to take these a bit further down here. And now I'm taking this edge, make a snapback copy, separate that out. Let's right click that and let's then convert it to being a curve. So with that, we can come down here to the curve menu. Let's put the bevel depth to 0.6. And now we can convert it back to being a mesh. So with that, we have a cylinder based on the size that we need it for. Let's fill that here. Let's then go to right orthographic view, and I'm going to use Super Smart Create simply to connect it here in the center. Let's then select this edge loop and let's give that a bevel like this. Now we can take these vertex points, go over to normal orientation, and we're dragging it out like this here. Let's right click and put the quick origin on that. And now we can rotate it as well as moving it and scaling it a bit more here according to the reference. Let's subdivide and bevel that. And now I'm going to give it an inset here like that. So once again with Control, we can push it a bit there to the inside. And with that, I am going back to this object. And let's just give that a bit of a bevel here where we actually see it. Let's reposition that a bit closer to our reference here. And these edges, they should be hidden in that small object there. So now let's right click that in object mode and let's convert it to being a curve. Let's come down to the bevel and let's put the depth to 0.4 and the resolution, we can put it down to 1. Otherwise, it's simply too high poly there. Let's scale that up a bit and let's then just reposition it a bit here like this. Now we can make a copy of that object because we have two of them. Let's just isolate that here and I'm going to put the orientation to normal on that one. Let's rotate that around here. And that might take a moment until you get it looking right. Just take your time. We want to make sure that this is realistically wrapped around that little wire there. And that can feel a little bit wonky there with the orientation, but in short, as long as it really looks like it's wrapped around that piece, that is what we want. And we can also control that here individually now because it's still a curve. So let's take a look at this here from that angle. And let's then take these vertex points to once again make it appear as if this is really coming out there. We can delete some of these points here. Wherever we can then save a few polygons, we should certainly do that. And based on that, we got that wire looking pretty good now. Let's just come down here and let's position that a bit further down like that. And since we have some vertex points down here which are not doing much for us, we can reuse these to bring them a bit further up there to emphasize on that curve there. So let's leave it at that for now. and let's continue here with the next detail. I'm going to hide the inside part, which leaves us then with our original exterior hull. Let's put the solidify off. Remember, we still have solidify on that. And let's put a cylinder here with 24 sides into the center. And let's drag that out, same as we did before. You can see my dimensions here on the right side. And I am going to copy it then also into the other place. Let's make another snapback copy, which we can then bring over to the other side. And based on that cylinder, we can also then just scale that down for this detail that we have down here. Let's connect it and let's delete the lower half and let's extrude then some faces out here like this. So I was just giving that a fill at the bottom as well. And now we can go back to our solidify and collapse that. Let's leave the mirror on there for now, because there is one more thing I need to do. First of all, subdivide here. And then step 2, we use edge slide to align that there based on our reference. Let's take these vertex points and let's vertex snap them so that this is aligned there. Now we can make use of edge slide. I don't want to compromise our main shape, so edge slide will maintain that. Let's also then take these edges, let's subdivide that, and with our edge slide, let's bring that up. Let's add another subdivision, and now we're going to give that a small bevel here like this. And based on these vertex points, we can now push it out like this here. So that is good for the upper part. This one we're gonna extrude out like this. Push that down a bit here. And let's take these edges and let's give that a bevel here with 2 segments. And speaking of bevel, I'm going to do the same thing here at that corner. 3 segments, or let's put it to 4 to be generous here. Let's dissolve some edges that we don't need. Let's select these ones here together with Shift, press M, and let's collapse that down. So I decided that these cylinders with the 24 sides, they are too low poly looking. We're going to keep the same dimensions, but instead we will now increase that to 32. And let's aim for the center, and with vertex snap, we have it then exactly in the same dimension as we had that before. Now we can make a snapback copy, and while pressing Shift, followed by Ctrl and A, we put the selection to active then for that copied one. So that means we now have the higher poly versions in place, and we can then take them into isolation and let's join them together, Ctrl and J. Let's go over here and let's align that S, X, and 0. And that way we have a proper Boolean operator. The other one was too low poly. Now it's time to collapse the mirror modifier here. And that means it's time for a Boolean operation. Let's make sure that this is clipping through on both sides here. And I'm going to position it like this here on the exterior side. Let's make some space again before we do the Boolean. And we can then dissolve, but this time we're doing a limited dissolve. so that nothing else gets dissolved that we want to maintain in place there. And on that side, we can dissolve these edges here. The other ones we cannot dissolve. We still need those. So let us then select the Boolean operator first, and with Shift we select the outer hull. Let's put that to difference, but let's keep it like that for the moment, because the next thing that we have to work on is making sure that we have this bevel that we can see here on the reference. Let's just take that face there at the back. Let's scale that down here. And I want you to pay attention to this gray edge loop that we see here. This one. This actually shows us where our Boolean comes through on the other side. So based on that, I was just dragging it up, position that a bit further down. Let's see it here from the other side, and I'm going to drag that in until that hole is above this edge here. I don't want that to be intersecting, so please take a look that this is also the case on your end. And now we can do the same thing here on that side. Once again, we have this edge loop there, which shows us where this is all at. And here on that side, I am just making sure that it's above this edge there at the bottom. Let's apply the Boolean, and while being in X-ray mode, press H to hide the left side now, which makes it less distracting for us to work on it. Let's unhide our other elements. And now it's time to refine a bit further here the silhouette. And I'm going to give it a bevel here on these edges. And I want to then make sure that these vertex points are merged together. So that was merging two vertices. And now we can just manually position that a bit further, add a subdivision there into the center, and just make sure that our silhouette is really nice and curved there. And speaking of which, I'm going to give that one here another bevel with 2 segments. So that takes care of this part here. And now I'm going to unhide again. Alt and H will unhide. Let's then take it here in the orthographic view. And with these vertex points, I'm not liking the alignment there. So I'm going to do the same thing that we did previously. First of all, align that, followed by using our quick lattice. And that way we have that looking more nice there. And that just means that we can now collapse the lattice, delete the helper object, or let's first align that here already. Make sure this is nice and smooth. And now we can delete the helper. And let's unhide again the other elements, because now it's time for the other side here. Let's make sure this is clipping through all the way, and let's then go over to make a difference. We're making a difference here. Let's collapse that. And we want to then make some connections here. Let's dissolve these 2 edges. And let's just make some connections also then on that side, same as before. That way we have that nice and clean looking there and optimized. And it's then also time to already cut these holes in there. And that will be not much different from what we were just doing. Let's get a good view on that here. In the left orthographic view, let's spawn a cylinder here with 18 sides. And I'm going to drag that a bit further up here on the z-axis because I don't want these edges there at the bottom to intersect with it. So instead of letting it come through all the way, I'm going to make it a bit more easy for us, and I'm going to position it here like that. Otherwise, we have too many edges there in the way. Let's make a snapback copy, and let's then drag that over here on our y-axis. Let's make another copy, and let's position that then here on the other side. Now we can take our cylinders and with Ctrl J, let's merge them. Let's select this case and let's put that to difference. So let's apply that. And now we can spawn a bolt here. Let me show you how to do that first of all. You need to put the Bolt Factory plugin on, which comes pre-installed with Blender. You just have to enable it. So the next step is to press Shift and A as if we spawn a cube or anything else. But instead we come down here to where it says Bolt. And let's then refine these settings here. Let's put that to torques and to cap. And based on that, let's simply delete all the faces here at the bottom from it. Let's fill that there at the bottom. Or in fact, let's delete it. Let's fill it here. And now we can position that a bit further up there for the inside parts. Let's put the quick origin on that. And now with a 90-degree rotation, we are going to position that in here. Let's position it, and we want to then scale it up a bit. And since that will be our high poly model, we can then take the inside vertex points, grow the selection, and drag that further here to the front because we want that to project on our low poly later, which doesn't have this detail. Let's make a copy of it, which we take into isolation. And let me then call that one _low. And now I'm going to grow the selection here up until that point and delete the faces. Let's select once again with Shift and Control and numpad every second edge. Let's fill that. And based on that, let's then position it here according to our high poly model. So here's the high poly. Let's also call it properly here with _high. And that will then already take care of this detail. Let's just select both of them and let's make that a bit more short here. Let's leave that as it is here for now. And let's come back here to some of these edges which are connecting to nowhere. We want to connect it like that, dissolve that edge, and while we're at it, let's also take a look at the same issue here where we can connect it like that and then dissolve the one that's not connecting anywhere where we want that. So on that side, we can also connect it, dissolve the lower edge, and do the same thing here. And now what we want to do is select all these faces here and also everything here on that side. Let me do that again. So with that selection, we right-click, triangulate the faces, right-click again, and put that to quads. And with that, my friends, we are at the end of this episode. I know it was quite long and a lot of different things happening, but that is what it takes, and I hope to see you in the next episode as well as in the briefing before we get started then on the next one. See you there.